Hello everyone. Today I continue on the specific guidance on the issues of e-invoice part 2. So for the part 2, we will cover what is self-built e-invoice and then payments to agents, dealers or distributors, and also cross-border transactions and then profit distributions, currency exchange rate, and then e-commerce transactions. Also, last part will cover the frequently asked question, which was prepared by LHT Insight. Okay, so first one is about self-built e-invoice. So self-built e-invoice, actually not all the, usually it's to record the expenses, to prove the expenses. So, but if you have following this transaction, and then you only can issue self-built e-invoice. So these are the payment to agents, dealers, and distributors. Also goods sold or services rendered by foreign sellers. Then profit distribution, e-commerce transactions, payout to all betting and gaming winners, then also the acquisition of goods or services from individual taxpayers, also interest payment, except businesses that charge interest to public at large, and then interest payment made by employee to employee, also the interest payment made by foreign payer to Malaysian taxpayers. The last part is claim and compensation from the insurance company. Okay, so if your transactions, your expenses are not in this list, then you cannot issue self-built e-invoice. So you cannot just simply issue self-built e-invoice. You must follow this list. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the scenario for the self-built e-invoice. So for example, this one, in this scenario, buyer need to issue a self-built e-invoice when purchasing products from an individual who is not conducting a business. Okay, so in here, Tina sells one of her teddy bears to Kedai Permainan Cuddle Bears, which buys and sells used toys. So as an individual not engaged in businesses is exempt from issuing e-invoice. So Tina is not obligated to issue an e-invoice to Kidai, the store. So in that case, so Kidai permanent cuddle bears need to issue a self-built e-invoice to prove their expenses. Then he can also share that validated self-built e-invoice with Tina. Okay. So this one is another scenario, like business tenants have to issue self-built e-invoice on rental and utility bills if landlord does not conduct a business. In the session, in the part 1 session, I already explained about how that landlord and tenant one will be issuing the e-invoice. That one was for the corporate, like the landlord that who conducting the business. But this part, so for today's session, we will discuss about this landlord does not conduct business. So if the landlord does not conducting any business, then the other side need to issue separate e-invoice to prove their expenses. So in this scenario, Tina, an individual who does not conduct a business, owns a commercial shoplet. She rents her shoplet to Kida Electronics Smart Gadget. So as Tina is an individual who is not conducting a business, she doesn't need to issue e-invoice to Smart Gadget for the rental and utilities that pay by Smart Gadget. So in this case, Smart Gadget, they need to issue self-paid e-invoice for their rental and utility expenses that they pay to Tina. So for the information side, they need to put Tina's information. Okay. The next part is tenants need to issue self-paid e-invoice for rental with multiple landlords who are not conducting a business. In this case, Best Mesra Sandiyan Berhan rents an office space owned by three brothers, Heikal, Alif, and Arif. So as Heikal, Alif, and Arif are individuals who is not conducting any business, So they are exempted from issuing e-invoice. So they don't issue e-invoice to Best Misra for the rental and utilities. So in this case, Best Misra is required to create and submit self-bid e-invoice to Heikal, Alif, and Arif to record their expenses. Okay. Okay, then next part is buyers are not required to issue self-bid e-invoice if the interest payment is made to a financial institution. Okay, so here Tina secured a loan from bank to finance the purchase of her car. Tina makes monthly installment payments consisting of principal and interest to the bank. Okay, so as Tina is making an interest payment to a bank, she is not required to issue a self-bid e-invoice. Instead, she will receive an e-invoice from bank. Okay, so in this case, financial side will issue the e-invoice to the Tina side. Okay, next scenario is about buyers are required to issue self-bid e-invoice on interest payment made to related companies like non-financial institution. Okay, so previous one is for the financial institution. For financial institution, you don't need to issue any self-bid e-invoice. So financial institution side need to issue e-invoice to you. But if let's say it's not financial institution, then you need to issue self-bid e-invoice. For example, here the smart gadget has obtained 1 million loan from its holding company, which is Smart Sandhya Berhad. So Smart charges interest on the loan to Smart Gadget. So in this case, Hidai Electric Smart Gadget is required to create and submit a separate e-invoice for interest paid to Smart. So Smart Sandhya Berhad, they don't need to issue e-invoice. The one that who is paying the interest charges need to issue separate e-invoice. Okay, so as the buyer is required to assure the role of supplier and issue separate e-invoice, the buyer is obligated to share the validated separate e-invoice with the supplier upon validation. So in this case, so I put the list here. So this is the first column is about the transaction that who need for those who can issue separate e-invoice. Then second column is the supplier side. Who will be the supplier in this case on the e-invoice, and then who will be the buyer in this case. So you can look into this one. So first one is payment to agent and dealers, distributors. In this case, when you're issuing the self-bid e-invoice for the supplier side, then you need to put the agents or dealers or distributors details on the e-invoice. But for the buyer side, then you are the one who creating the self-bid invoice, so you need to put your information to the buyer side. So all the name, TIN, and registration number you need to follow based on this one. For supplier side, you need to put the suppliers, which is agents, dealers, distributors information. Then buyer side is your information. Okay, so also the same for the goods sold or services rendered by foreign suppliers. So in this case, you need to put the foreign sellers information on the supplier information side on the e-invoice. Then buyer information is your information as a purchaser, Malaysian purchaser. Okay, so for profit distribution center, also the supplier side is the recipient of the distribution, and then taxpayer is yourself. The buyer side, you need to put your own information. Okay, so next part, for the e-commerce transaction, so merchant, service provider, are the supplier side. Then buyer is the e-commerce, which is the platform side. So for this e-commerce part, later I will explain in more details. Also will show you the workflow. Then next part is payout to all betting and gaming winners. So this one is supplier is the recipient of the payout. Then buyer is the licensed betting and gaming provider. Okay. Then next one is transaction with individuals who are not conducting a business. So supply side, you need to put the individual who is not conducting a business. Then buyer side is yourself as a purchaser. Then seven transaction is interest payment. So for the interest payment, supplier will be the recipient of interest payment. Then buyer will be the taxpayer that makes the interest payment. Okay. And then last part, the claim compensation or benefit payments from the insurance businesses. So in here, the supplier will be the policy holder and the beneficiary. Then the buyer will be the insurer. Okay. So in here, I will explain about the details of individual supplier for issuance of self-billed e-invoice. So here for the first one is supplier's name. For the supplier's name, you need to put the full name of the supplier based on as per their Malaysia. If they are local, then based on their IC, BRN. If they are foreigner, then based on their passport. Okay, then next one is supplier's TIN or supplier registration number, IC number, or passport number. For here, if let's say Malaysian individuals, the supplier only provide the TIN number, then you need to put this 12 digits of 0 for the identification number. If they provide the TIN number, but they didn't provide the BRN. If it's the supplier, foreign supplier is the company, then for the BRN side, you need to put an A. Okay, then for if let's say they only provide the identification number or their BRN, but they didn't provide the TIN number, then for the TIN number you need to put this general TIN number, which is end with 10. Then another option is you can put both TIN number and the ID number. Okay, but for the non-Malaysian individuals, you can, if they have the TIN number, then you can just put the TIN number. If they don't have a TIN number, but they provide identification number, BRN or passport number, then for the TIN, you need to put EI, then 000030. Okay, so for this part, you need to make sure for the foreign supplier, when you issuing self-billed e-invoice, you need to make sure you are using the correct TIN number, which ends with 30. Okay. Then other than that, they also can provide both TIN and passport number. Then next part is for the supplier address, then you can use their residual address or business address. Then you need to put the supplier's contact number and then supplier SSD registration number. If not applicable, then you just put an A. And then for you also need to put the supplier's MSIC code. So for the supplier's MSIC code, if you don't know their MSIC code or they didn't provide, or if it's not applicable, then you can put 0000. Then next part is you also need to put the supplier business activity description. For the business activity description, if it's not applicable, then you can put an A. Okay, so in this here, because of 6 months grace period, you are allowed to issue consolidated self-billed e-invoice, but only during this 6 months grace period. So for the consolidated self-billed e-invoice, also similar to the normal consolidated e-invoice, so you must submit the consolidated self-billed e-invoice within 7 calendar days after the month end. And then you also can choose to adopt any of this. Maybe you need to, first one is like you can use one receipt number from one line in the consolidated e-invoice, or you can use the continuous receipt number, put the range in the line items, or you can use branch or location to submit the consolidated self-billed e-invoice, adopting any of first or second second option. Okay, then for the details part, details of supplier for issuance of consolidated self-bill is as follow. So for the supplier name, you still can put general public. Then supplier TIN will be start with EI and end with 10. Then supplier registration number, passport number, you need to put NA, and then supplier address NA, contact number, and the SSC registration, all NA, and then here got extra two fields that you need to put. Which one? First one is MSIC code, but for the buyer side it doesn't require so. But if you issuing separate e-invoice, then you need to put the supplier's MSIC code. So in the consolidated separate e-invoice, you need to put 50. Then for the business activity description part, you need to put an A. Okay, so you can take a note on this part. So, but this is only applicable during grace period. Okay. And then next part. Okay, so next part is about the payments to agents, dealers, or distributors. So in this part, the use of an agent, dealer, or distributor is a commonly seen businesses supply chain. Like so in this part, like they are like a third party, so they usually earns the money from seller side. Seller is referring to the product owner or service owner. They earn the money from their commission. Okay, but sometimes it also like earn the money from monetary or non-monetary payments. So for the purpose of e-invoice, the seller making the monetary or non-monetary payments to the ADD is required to issue a self-bid e-invoice. So for this one, doesn't matter your agent is conducting any business or not conducting business. If let's say you have commission to your sales agent, then you also need to issue self-bid e-invoice. If you are paying a commission to a third-party distributor company, then you also need to issue self-bid e-invoice. Okay, so this is the workflow. If you look at here, so seller is the service provider or product owner. Then third party is the agent, dealer, and distributor. Then the purchaser is the last one. So in this scenario, based on this workflow, the purchaser will purchase the agent and dealer. Usually purchaser will contact with the agent or dealer. Then the agent and dealer will contact with the company. Then after purchaser make the payment to the company, then company will pay the commission to the agent or dealer or distributor. So in this case, then the seller need to issue self-bid e-invoice on the commission that they pay to the agent. Okay, so this one is the scenario, like buyer or payer, the company shall issue self-bid e-invoice to applicable transactions for payments to agent, dealer, and distributor, for example, the commission. Okay, in this case, Alif is a car salesman at Born Automotive Sanderian Berhad. Then Alif sold a Model T car for 600,000 and earned a 30% of commission. Okay, so in this scenario, Born Automotive issue a self-bid e-invoice to record the 20% commission paid to Alif. But here I didn't put one more scenario, which is because if you look at this second part, you can see the customer make the payment to Bond company. So Bond receive the money from the customer directly. In this case, Bond also need to issue e-invoice to the customer. So in this scenario, actually, Bond need to issue two e-invoice. One is self-bid e-invoice to Alif, which is the salesman for the commission. The second e-invoice is the e-invoice to the customer directly, which the customer who buy the car from Bond. Okay. Then after they submit the self-bid e-invoice and then the e-invoice, the normal e-invoice to customer, then Bond company can share the validated e-invoice and self-bid e-invoice with the salesman and the customer separately. Okay, so this is one of the examples for the self-billed e-invoice. Okay, so if you look at here, in the description part, they already put like agent commission on the car, 20%. Okay, so they need to make sure that they put the details on the printable and share this QR code or validated self-billed e-invoice with their sales agent or distributor. Okay. Okay, so next part is about the cross-border transactions. So cross-border transaction is like involve that referring to the transaction between Malaysian buyer and foreign supplier or vice versa. Okay, so here like foreign sellers refers to any seller operating outside of Malaysia or not established in Malaysia, including non-Malaysian individuals. And conversely, foreign buyer refers to any foreign person who acquires goods or services from Malaysia. Okay. The foreign seller is not required to issue an e-invoice. Okay. Instead, the Malaysian buyers is required to issue self-billed e-invoice to record the expenses, because foreign seller they don't have we don't know they are having their own country's e-invoice or no, so they are not required to issue an e-invoice. So only the buyer, Malaysian buyer, they need to prove their expenses, so they need to issue a self-billed e-invoice for this part. Okay, so this is the scenario. Malaysian buyers are required to issue self-billed e-invoice for services acquired from foreign sellers. So if you look at here, like Food Aid Sdn Bhd hires legal advisor, which is ABC Advisory from the UK for legal advice. Then ABC Advisory issue normal invoice to Food Aid Sdn Bhd, which is they are Malaysian buyer for the service they provided. Then as ABC Advisory is not required to issue an e-invoice, so Food Aid Sdn Bhd is required to issue a separate e-invoice to record their expenses. Okay. Okay, this one is second scenario. Businesses are required to issue a self-billed e-invoice when purchasing imported goods from a foreign seller. Okay, so here if you look at the first one, Bobby runs Kedai Electronic Smart Gadget, an electronic store based in Malaysia. So on 20 June, Bobby imports most of his products from a seller in China, and the custom clearance is obtained on 20th June. Okay, so as the Chinese seller is not required to issue an e-invoice, so Bobby is required to submit a self-billed e-invoice latest by 31st July. So based on LHDN requirement, if your custom clearance date is on 20 June, then you must submit your e-invoice, self-billed e-invoice latest by next month, end of next month. So this is the requirement. You need to make sure that you submit your self-billed e-invoice within the end of, before the end of next month of the custom clearance. Okay, so this is one of the requirements. You need to take note on this one for the imported goods part. Okay. So next part we will look into profit distribution. So currently companies distributing the profits to its shareholders issues dividend vouchers or dividend warrants to its shareholders. So upon implementation of e-invoice in Malaysia, taxpayers that are not entitled to deduct tax under Section 108 of the income tax, as well as taxpayers who are listed on Bursa Malaysia, will be exempted from issuing separate e-invoice on dividend distribution. So you need to make sure that you have this to any of this. Then if you are under any of them, then you are not required to, you are exempted from issuing separate e-invoice. If you are not you are not exempted on this part, then you need to make sure that you issue self-billed e-invoice for the profit distribution. Okay. If let's say correspondingly, the shareholders are not required to issue an e-invoice for proof of income. Okay, but this exemption will be reviewed and updated from time to time. Okay. So this one is how you need to issue self-billed e-invoice. Okay, so for the first one is like domestic distribution. So for the domestic distribution, you need to issue self-billed e-invoice for proof of expense. So supplier side should be the recipient of the distribution. Then buyer side is the taxpayer that makes the distribution. Okay, so if you are the domestic distribution, you need to make sure that you submit the self-billed e-invoice based on this one. Then if let's say you have foreign profits or you pay foreign dividend, then you need to issue e-invoice for the proof of the foreign income. In this case, supplier is the recipient of the income, which is the taxpayer, yourself. Then buyer is the foreign buyer. Okay. Another part is the dividend part or distribution. So you need to issue self-billed e-invoice for the proof of distribution. So for the supply side, you need to make sure that you put the recipient of the distribution, which is foreign supplier. Then buyer side is the taxpayer, which is yourself, to prove that you had this expenses on this distribution. You make this payment, okay, to the foreign supplier. Okay, next part is about the currency exchange rate. So this currency exchange rate in the e-invoice data field can be used for transactions conducted in foreign currency. Okay, so if you are required to put the currency exchange rate, you need to follow these two scenarios. First one is supplier shall comply with the legal or tax requirements on the currency exchange rate as imposed by relevant authorities, like maybe Royal Malaysian Customs Department or from IRBM. Which one is applicable? Depends on which one is applicable. Second one is if first one is not applicable, then you need to follow your own, supplier may follow your own currency exchange rate based on your internal policy. Okay. For the purpose of self-billed e-invoice, you also can use your internal currency exchange rate based on your internal policy. Right? Okay, so next part is about the e-commerce transaction. Okay, e-commerce transaction is referred to any sales or purchase of goods or services conducted over any networks by methods specifically designed for the purpose of receiving or placing of orders. The goods or services are ordered by those methods, but the payment and the ultimate delivery of the goods or services do not have to be conducted online. Okay, so this one actually mainly like referring to the something like Shopee, Lazada. So if you look at this workflow, so e-commerce platform is the online platform like Shopee and Lazada. So supplier one is the merchant, the product owner or service provider. They will publish their product or services on this online platform, e-commerce platform. Then purchaser will purchase the product or services from the e-commerce platform. Then e-commerce platform will notify the supplier one. Then supplier one will issue will sell the goods. So after they selling the goods, then supplier two, they are the service provider, logistics service provider. They will go and pick up the goods and then send to the purchaser. Okay, so this is the whole current workflow. Then after that, after they done all the transaction, then e-commerce platform, they will make the payment to supplier 1 and then supplier 2. Okay. Okay, so this is the scenario. E-commerce platforms providers are responsible for issuance of e-invoice to buyers and separate e-invoice, which is to seller. Okay, so in this scenario, if you look at here, Tina purchases a smartphone from Kita Electric Smart Gadget, which is supplier, from the local e-commerce platform, which they call Zipit. Okay, if Tina requires an e-invoice, Zipit, which is the online platform, the e-commerce platform, is required to submit an e-invoice to LHDN on behalf of Kida Electric Smartphone. So in this case, if Tina requires an e-invoice, then online platform will provide the e-invoice, not the the actual seller. Okay, we need to make sure that e-commerce provider is providing the e-invoice to the customer side and share the visual representation of the e-invoice to Tina. If let's say Tina didn't require an e-invoice, then this e-commerce provider, the platform, need to consolidate the e-invoice and then submit to LHDN. So not the Kida Electronic Smart Gadget. Okay. Then after that, after this transaction, then Zipit is also required to submit a separate e-invoice to LHDN to record the payment to Kida Electronic Smart Gadget, which is seller. Okay. So because Zipit is, they need to make the payment to Kidai. Okay, so also in this case, they need to issue separate e-invoice to record their payment to Kidai, and then at the same time, they need to share the validated separate e-invoice with Kidai Electronic Smart Gadget. Okay. Okay, and then one more thing is here, because here we already mentioned that they have service provider here also, right? So for the service provider side, also e-commerce platform need to issue separate e-invoice because they need to make the payment to service provider. Okay, so they are the one who need to issue the separate e-invoice for this scenario also. Okay, so this is the all the transaction that related to e-invoice that we need to take note. Okay, then last part is frequently asked question, which was provided by LHDN site. I didn't put all the question here, but I just put few of them. Okay, so first one is, do business need to submit an e-invoice within the same day the transaction is being made? Okay, in this case, LHDN site said that no specific requirement on this part. Okay, so you can submit your e-invoice anytime except the consolidated e-invoice. Because for the consolidated e-invoice, the requirement is you must submit your last month's last month transaction by 7th of next month. Okay, so and then the another one is separate e-invoice for the importation of goods and services. Okay, this one just now I already mentioned that you need to follow the custom clearance, the date. Okay, so you need to make sure you submit your separate e-invoice for the foreign income or services by end of next month. Okay. Then next question is, do buyers need to issue separate e-invoice to record expenses when dealing with supplier located in rural areas with poor internet connectivity? Okay, so they mentioned that self-billed e-invoice is only allowed for certain transactions as stated under the e-invoice specific guideline. Just now we already have around 8 transactions. So for now, only 8, those listed 8 transactions can be issued separate e-invoice. If other than that, you cannot issue any separate e-invoice, even they are having poor internet connectivity. Okay. if like businesses who are facing poor internet connectivity and lack infrastructure to issue e-invoice are advised to approach the nearest IRBM branch located across all states in Malaysia for further discussion. Okay, the next question is what is the time frame to issue e-invoice adjustments like debit note, credit note, and refund note after the 72 hours validation period? Okay, so for this part, if you cannot cancel your original document within 72 hours, then you can issue debit note, credit note, or refund note to do the adjustment to the original e-invoice. So for this part, there's no any like time frame restriction. Okay, so you can just have your own company policy for this part. Next question is what is the e-invoice treatment for deposit? Okay, so for deposit, in case where the deposit is refundable, the issuance of e-invoice is not required. However, if the deposit is non-refundable, issuance of e-invoice is required. Okay, so you need to make sure that your deposit is refundable or not refundable. Okay, so based on this one, then you can decide whether you need to submit e-invoice or not. Okay. Next question is about what is the e-invoice treatment for director fees. So for here, you also need to make sure that this director is under which contract. So first one is the contract for service, which is generally considered as the independent contractor, example consulting contract. If they are under this contract, then the director is required to issue e-invoice to the company for any income received if the director is having the contract, which is contract of service, like employer and employee relationship. Then in this case, the director fee is considered as employment income, so which is exempted from issuance of e-invoice. Okay. Next part is, do we need to issue e-invoice for intercompany charges? Yes, an e-invoice is required to be issued for intercompany charges. Okay. The next part is e-invoice required for interdepartment or interdivision transactions within the same company? So for this one, no e-invoice is required for interdepartment or interdivision transaction within the same company. However, businesses may issue e-invoice between interdepartment and interdivision depending on the business practice. Okay, so it depends on your business practice actually. Okay, so that's all for today. If you have any other questions, you can contact with me, or you also can go to LHD and their website to check they have list of frequently asked questions. Actually, they already published all the questions and then they already separate by industry. So you can go to their website and then check the question also. So do you have any other question?